morning to everyone and a very warm welcome to you all to London, first of all. As a Londoner, I feel I need to say that. I wish I could say welcome to warm and sunny and summery London, where strikes don't exist and everything works just fine, but nevertheless, I think it's a city full of science and fun. So my name is Elena Nikiforu. I'm a clinical academic rheumatologist from King's College London, and I am delighted to be co-chairing this session together with
Christoph Berwald, Rheumatology from Leipzig in Germany.
And together with Christoph, we will be focusing on this session on inflammatory arthropathies and mental health, bridging the gap. We have three fantastic speakers. Without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Prof. Len Calabrese. He doesn't really need an introduction. Prof. Calabrese is from the Cleveland Clinic. Len, over to you. He'll be telling us about the science of connection, inflammation, and mental health. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elena. It's a great pleasure to be here. I love the opportunity to speak in this forum on this topic. I'm a clinical immunologist with a special interest in the brain-immune axis, and I'm going to take this first opening talk here to talk about the science that belies mood disorders and all the things that are attendant to mood disorders that patients with, we talk about the topic of inflammatory arthritis, but I'm really going to widen this up to the topic of immune-mediated inflammatory diseases. So most of my comments apply to all of this. Now to do this, and we have a kind of a mixed audience of patient advocates and scientists and rheumatologists. I'm going to tell you three stories to make this case. I'm going to start out, I'm going to talk about what the problem with care is right now and how we are always trying to get to our targeted goals and what the problems are in achieving that. Secondly, I'm going to make a case, and I would talk about this in the most robust science section, that we are now at a moment that I view the immune system as the sixth sense of the body. The brain-immune axis is paramount in controlling immunity and obviously plays a prominent role in depressive disorders and attendant mood disorders. And then I'm going to talk to you about a model for contextualizing mood disorders, including depression, in the context of pain, fatigue, neurocognition, and beyond. So let's start out with the problem in rheumatology and patients with rheumatoid arthritis, or this could be lupus or SPA or something like this, is that we have very powerful tools in our toolbox. And when we make a diagnosis of this, we have a goal of getting to people at a target, and that target is to really control their disease and improve the quality of life and make all the measures of disease activity regress. And given the bounty of biologic therapies and potent therapies we're doing a pretty good job at this. Yet at the same time, there is a substantial portion, whether this is 15 or 30%, that fail to get to this target. Their quality of life is still low. They're still in pain. They have other attendant symptoms, and that's kind of this glass ceiling effect. So the first question is, why does this happen? What do we know about those 30% of patients? Well, some of them just have terrible disease, and we can't control the inflammation, but that's really a relatively small part. Most patients who fit into that bucket have what we've traditionally called fibromyalgia, which we now recognize under the rubric of a nociplastic pain disorder. And I know that there are some patients and non-scientific people here, but this is a family of diseases that share a number of comorbid conditions. including a very high incidence of depression as well as other neuropsychiatric problems, including anxiety and beyond. Now, the role of depression in patients with rheumatic diseases, RA being the prototype, has been well known and elucidated over the years. And in fact, in longitudinal studies, if you have depression, suffer from depression, and then develop rheumatoid arthritis, so after the mood disorder, the likelihood of achieving this target of going into remission is reduced by 50 to 75%. So think about that. It's a dramatic figure, and the question is why, and I'm going to pull this apart for you. So the story that I'm telling you is based upon this tenet, and that is that the immune system and the nervous system are one. This is not like go to the immunology thing and go to the brain thing. This is all one, and this is a disruptive advance in immunology, and probably 1,000 people here that will argue with me, and I say bring them on. It's okay. If you accept this, tenet, that means that the brain regulates immunity, that the immune system also regulates brain function and affects our behavior, that immune responses are immunologically patterned, and that all of these things are, including cognition, mood, pain, fatigue, and behavior, are wrapped up with inflammation. So what are the evidence? I have a lot of really good references here for you. Most of them are very recent and narrative. And I just give you some evidence that everyone knows about, because we've all experienced this. So you get sick, you have a respiratory virus, or you got your Shingrix vaccine and your arm is swollen up and you have a low-grade fever. What do you want to do? Do you want to go to the gym and go run around? No. Your brain says, go to bed. And it says, I don't really want to eat too much. And, you know, we are like animals when we're sick. We don't groom ourselves the way we normally do. You just want to just flop there. Patients also have psychomotor slowing, anhedonia, depressed affect, and it's very close to tripping into a clinically significant mood disorder. So these symptoms are generated by the immune sensing in the brain, and the brain is affecting our behavior. It's part of this axiom that I'm telling you. And the science belies this, but I started with this because we all experience this. A second area is called central sensitization, and this is the method that belies fibromyalgia. Now, I will use the term fibromyalgia, though in pain circles we call this nociplastic pain disorder. And this is a concept that in patients who suffer from this disorder, that stimuli that normally don't bother a person without this are very painful. There is an accentuation of these afferent pathways that go to brain saying, this isn't light touch, this is something that hurts me like heck. And then secondly, there are areas in our brain which are soothing, which tend to downregulate this pain, and they're defective. So you're caught in this vicious cycle of accentuated afferent and depressed efferent. This newer model is important because the historical model of this, and many patients here have experienced this, you have chronic pain. You're just depressed. And your accentuation of your pain complaints to me is a form of somatization, which is inappropriate. The newer model tells us that depression and central sensitization are overlapping brain network disorders, and we have to approach them as such. There's tons of evidence here, and I'm just going to go over this quickly, that support this inflammation and neuropsychiatric disorder link. in patients who have been followed longitudinally, and there have been studies that have started in childhood and gone into adulthood, people who become depressed actually have inflammatory markers that long ante onset of their depression. So that is an important marker. And that, secondly, the entire family of immune-mediated inflammatory diseases demonstrate a 4 to 10 times increased incidence of depression than patients in the general population. This isn't an adjustment disorder because you have a chronic disease. I believe that this is intimately related to this brain immune inflammatory axis. Now, the immunologic evidence is robust, and there are genetic studies which are associated with alleles that are hyperinflammatory, biomarker analysis. Depression, what is the most highly efficient biomarker for depression? It's CRP, or IL-6, particularly IL-6. I could go on, but I want to get to the story to explain this to an audience that represents a spectrum in your declarative knowledge about immunology. So for the past century, we've tried to figure out what triggers the immune system and what triggers autoimmune disease. And for the first half of the 20th century, this was mostly guesswork. But by 1950, Sir Frank McFarlane Burnett won the Nobel Prize for his work elucidating what an autoimmune reaction would be. And he said that there are cells that are produced in the body that are immune mediators. These later became known as T cells and B cells that are autoreactive, and he called them forbidden clones. And they have to be eliminated. If you don't eliminate the forbidden clones, you develop an autoimmune disease. And that was accepted, that we recognize non-self, and that's how our immune system works. But that's an incomplete picture. We are surrounded by foreign antigens. We eat foreign antigens. We're covered with foreign antigens. So in 1996, Polly Matzinger at the NIH proposed a new theory. Said, well, that's all well and good, but the foreign things that triggers our immune system has to be dangerous. So we sense danger. And that was an incomplete answer because this was at a cellular level, that these cells are stressed and have stress proteins, or they're senescent and they're mechanically defective. That is an incomplete story because over the past 15 years, the third form of danger has been presented. They're not PAMPs and DAMPs, and that are external and extrinsic threats to our well-being. And much of this work was pioneered by my friend Michael Irwin with Stephen Cole at UCLA. And you know, what can trigger our immune system that's not a foreign antigen? Well, it's the exigencies of living in this world. You know, multiple screens and TikTok and crazy politics and the global warming and pollution, and we live a stressful life in this modern world. We have so much going on. The mechanisms that influence the immune system are two. The hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal gland produce steroids, which affect the inflammation and the immune response. And more recently, and particularly over the past 25 years, pioneered by Kevin Tracy, the importance of the autonomic nervous system and vagal nerve health in modulating the immune response is disrupted in the presence of external threats. And this is something I'm happy to talk about as we go along. I asked my best friend, Open Evidence, for some high-impact references to support these data, and this QR code will lead you to them. Now, let me punctuate this and really drive this home to you. The last 5 years of immunology has been transformative. My thinking on my entire career in clinical immunology has been altered by a series of events that have been referred to as black swan events. These are experiments that, at face value, we would think this is never going to happen. You're testing something that's just not going to work because it's so low probability. And once it is published, we look at it, and there are two ways to look at this. To me, it was like waking up in the middle of the night when everyone else is sleeping. These have such high impact, and in hindsight, are readily explainable. And I'll give you two of them. The first is the notion of immunoception. Interoception is a biologic term that, our senses rule our body. You see a plate of food, it looks beautiful, I want to eat it. You pick it up and it smells terrible. You're not going to eat this because your senses have balanced out what your behavior is going to be. The immune system does the exact same thing. And it is stored in our brain, in our memory. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. On the right is the cholinergic anti-inflammatory reflex from the brain to the vagus nerve to the spleen. And this is the basis of a recent breakthrough in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis that if you told me about this 15 years ago, I would not have processed this. Immunoception is a term that has been proposed by Elisa Rolls from Tel Aviv, brilliant neuroimmunologist and neuroscientist. It's called immunoception. It's a paradigm shift. We think of immunologic memory as you get a flu vaccine, then you get the flu, and all your cells rally and produce antibodies, and you get rid of this. Once you've had the flu, that memory of that immune response is stored in the brain in an area called the insula, only found in higher order mammals. These stored experiences later in life affect our immune response. That is why so many patients with depression and so many patients with fibromyalgia and other nociplastic pain disorders, including ME/CFS, long COVID, and related conditions, have a history of cumulative lifetime trauma. This is part of the brain immune axis that limits the capacity to overcome this. And this has profound implications for treating inflammatory diseases. They aren't separate diseases. You don't have fibromyalgia and then you have rheumatoid arthritis. They are connected all in one. Now let me just show you something that, if you haven't seen this, just open your mind right now. This is an experiment done by Trabinelli from Switzerland, published within the past year, that shows us the power of the brain and the immune system. So the question was, can the brain produce an immune response independent of antigen exposure? Somebody didn't cough on you and get the flu this way. And so they did this with virtual reality. And I have worked in a virtual reality lab recently. And so they put VR glasses on subjects. And then they presented 3 avatars to these people. One was a person kind of walks up into your personal space and they're standing there very peacefully. The second is an avatar that's kind of threatening. It's acting kind of crazy and, like if you're on the tube, you'd want to go down to the next car. The third is an avatar that is sick. They look like they have a cold and they're coughing and sneezing and they invade your personal space, just like someone had a cold. The middle, this bar over here, shows the responses. So the first response is neutral. And what we are looking at are the mobilization of cells called innate lymphoid cells. First responders in our immune system, been around for 150 million years. They are very important cells. The third column is the threat, the physical threat. Not much different than the neutral. The red is the person that sneezes on you. And you mobilize your innate lymphoid cells like crazy. How impressive was this? A month later, they took the same subjects back and gave them an influenza vaccine. And you can see that the avatar response is at least as potent as actually getting a vaccination. This is all mediated by your brain. It is the deal. It's just a black swan observation. I still think about this constantly. That's called immunoception. The neuroimmune modulation, I've already talked about that. That is the vagal nerve implant. This is a disruptive advance in the treatment of rheumatoid. I love it, the fact that so many rheumatologists ring to it. That means that it's truly disruptive and as an advance. So lastly, let me talk about, the rheumatologist's dirty little secret, and that is fibromyalgia and nociplastic pain disorders. And what I'm saying here is that the patients who fail to reach target across rheumatic diseases most commonly have attendant pain, fatigue, neurocognition problems, and sleep disorders. This has with intercurrent mood disorders. Over half the patients have clinical depression and/or anxiety. Thirdly, patients who see rheumatologists who have the picture of fibromyalgia, nociplastic pain disorders are often marginalized and viewed as having a separate problem. Well, you have rheumatoid, I've taken care of that. This is another problem, go someplace. This is our disease. This is linked to our disease. It is a brain immune disease. And this is a message that needs to be championed. So I'm going to end this by saying, I hope I've given you the brain immune axis pitch and you understand this, that the message of this can serve to validate the lived experience of patients with IMIDs beyond the inflammatory joint disease. And for patients with IMIDs who have fibromyalgia, often attendant with mood disorders, yes, they need optimal control of inflammation, but they need holistic care as well. And that targets mood, fatigue, pain, sleep, physical reconditioning, and beyond. But most of all, they need empathic validation and support. That these symptoms are real, they're not in their head, they're not their fault. This completes the role of both care and caring. And I'll stop. Thank you. Got a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for this intriguing talk, laying the basis for questions and the following presentations. Are there any questions? Please advance to the microphones in the room. We can't see. I would like to start, if I may. You pointed out that there is a close interconnection between the immune system and the central nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. Besides the vagus nerve stimulation, are there other therapies influencing the nerve? The therapy of autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, I mean, the vagal nerve, the parasympathetic, the autonomic nervous system is the highway, but there are other ways of manipulating it. In the last year, there have been some high-quality studies, particularly in JAMA, of transcranial magnetic irradiation, very positive study in fibromyalgia, and last year, Leslie Crawford at ACR presented a multi-center study showing that electrocutaneous stimulation with TENS in an RCT was highly effective at fibromyalgia. And now we have, vagal nerve implant, and now there are 2 external vagal nerve treatments in advanced clinical trial. What all of these studies have failed to accommodate, they are looking at either pain or inflammation. I advocate, and they're in clinical trials in long COVID and ME/CFS and things like this. They need to look at patients in an integrated fashion. I want all quality of life measures. I want sleep, I want neurocognition, I want heart rate variability, I want biometrics and transcriptomics. The scientists have been over here, the behavioralists are over here. I'm trying to be the Talleyrand of getting them together.
Thank you.
Yes.
A question over there.
Hi, I'm Lucy from King's College London. I'm a postdoc here. I really enjoyed your talk. It was really great. I really enjoyed your rejection of the Cartesian dualism that's ingrained
It's only
in
300
modern
years old.
medicine.
It's okay.
I had a similar question to Christoph. You mentioned a lot about, immunoception, and I was just wondering what that really looks like, if you might have some ideas as to, for example, cognitive behavioral-wise, like therapies, what would that look like? Of course, like we have, heart rate variability and interoception, all of those things, but one of the major challenges that we face is that we don't necessarily have the time and money to provide these services for patients. So a lot of the times patients are expected to manage on their own. And I was just wondering, in their own time, what could they do to help alter that sort of immunoception to help with their physical and somatic and psychological symptoms?
Great question. Step one is getting them valid sources of information to increase their understanding of this. I use a website called the Bateman Horn Center. Free access. There's probably 50 videos on there, highly curated, and I show them a guide of what to do. Secondly, support groups that are facilitated, not just mosh pits. And I have several sources for this. Thirdly, we have started shared medical appointments to accommodate this that go through a holistic menu of things which include mind, body, all the things that have been around for a long time. I think that we need to do this in a high throughput way. Once the patient understands, that this is not in their head and not their fault, it is much more amenable to management.
Absolutely. And I guess it also builds on that sort of trust that you build with your patients.
The empathic connection is the beginning.
Yeah.
It's the beginning. Bateman Horn, B-A-T-E-M-A-N. Very easy, Salt Lake City, Lucinda Bateman. She's great.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, please.
Thanks very much for this fascinating presentation. So I was wondering were there any studies on the fibromyalgia patients to look at those who actually recover quickly and those who don't, and what's the differentiation on this immunoception axis, if we have any clue of what's the underlying mechanism?
I don't have an answer for that, and I don't usually see patients with fibromyalgia that recover quickly. I see patients who control it quickly. Invite me back next year to talk about the placebo response and the neuroimmune response to generate that through empathic communication. I tell you, I know when the patient leaves the room whether they are going to adjust their worldview of this. Are they going to expunge their guilt and accept this? This is a form of attunement. I don't care who you are. If you have an empathetic care provider, you've you're almost at the top of this, and I have nothing more to offer than any other doctor in the world, but people who are heard and validated. This is a reversible condition in the vast majority of people. And it doesn't go away, but it brings you back down into what Dr. Fred Wolf called fibromyalgia-ness, which we all have, moving from there. I think this requires a glass of white wine and hand waving to answer this, because I don't have a crisp answer, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much again. We have to advance to the next talk, and I'm pleased to introduce Caroline Kirsten. As you can imagine from my pronunciation, she is German, and so the pronunciation of her first name is Caroline in Germany, Caroline. She is currently serving as chair-elect of the Young Pare Group, and she is introducing herself, and I'm looking forward to her talk.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So as you can see from the title and from Christoph's short introduction of me, I am here to talk about the patient perspective and how it is that mental health actually affects us as patients. First of all, I'm the next leader of Young Pare. After this congress, actually, I'm part of the German Rheumatology. Have been since 2019, and I'm studying social work. And as you can imagine, and I already said, I'm a patient myself, and I've had quite a long story. When I look back now, I can say I'm pretty sure I always had an RMD. Even when I was a small kid in elementary school, I had problems. That we can now say, yeah, it was an RMD, and we just didn't know, and no one recognized. When I was 15, we started to look for a solution because the pain just didn't go away anymore. It took 1 year for me to get my first diagnosis of chronic pain, another 3 years to get another diagnosis of RA, which turned out, after another 3 years, to be the wrong diagnosis. And now I have the diagnosis of axSpA. So all in all, it took me around 20 years to get my diagnosis. And as you can imagine, that came also with a lot of mental health and psychological burdens. For the rest of these presentations, I have no conflict of interest, and the pictures can be taken at any time. When I got requested for this presentation, I asked myself, okay, mental health, big topic, right? And it applies to everyone. But what makes it unique to people with RMD? What are challenges that only we face? So I decided to focus on those 4 topics you see. Once the time around diagnosis, then living with an RMD, the feeling of running out of time all the time. I will explain that further on. And last but not least, a message of hope. It starts before the diagnosis, right? Because you don't get a diagnosis and the symptoms start. The symptoms start and you get a diagnosis. And as I just told you before, my journey to get a diagnosis was really long. That came with a lot of doubt and uncertainty. I was told from health professionals, from rheumatologists, that nothing was wrong with me, and it was all in my head. It made me worry about what might be wrong with me, if it really was in my head, really doubting my perception of me and my body. I was told I was faking it, not only by health professionals, but also from my peers around me in school, when I couldn't participate in sports, for example, or I could one day, and the next day I couldn't. And they were like, they just didn't understand it, which is fair, but hard for a teenager, right? And that feeling of not being taken seriously all the time just really stuck with me until I finally found people who understood and who yeah, just encouraged me to keep going. And I was really lucky. I had a mom, or I had me, I believe you, and we are finding a solution. But still, one voice against a lot of them sometimes doesn't feel like enough. Then it happened. I got a diagnosis, right? My first feeling was relief. Finally, I had something, right? It wasn't in my head. It was something that was wrong with me, and we could work on fixing it, or at least at making it better. But then I started realizing and thinking, okay, it won't go away. That will be a part of me and my life forever. And dealing with getting this diagnosis and with accepting that was really hard for me. It was really actually a process of grieving. I went to the 7 stages of grief, which are really short: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and in the end, acceptance. All of that I went through, and I'm gonna tell you, probably not once, because the process of grief is not linear, right? You go through one stage, maybe you skip the other, and then you come back to another one, and then you do it all over again until you start to actually accept it. And it's not only grieving the diagnosis, or just it's grieving your old life. It's grieving the idea of a future you would have had, especially as a young person. It's grieving what you thought you could do, and maybe you can't. Or I always say, I think people with RMD can do everything, but it costs us more, so make sure it's worth it. So sometimes you have to let go of an idea because you just decide for yourself it's not worth it. And grieving that, and grieving freeness you had pre-pain, pre-symptoms, just takes time, and it's hard, yeah, and it will influence your life. In the end, you have to adjust to this new reality. You have to accept that a chronic illness actually is chronic, like it won't go away. Maybe it will calm down, but it will come back probably. And you have to accept that you are gonna create a life around your RMD. Maybe not completely with it. I'm not always saying I'm happy to have an RMD, I'm not. But it did give me opportunities like this one, and I'm grateful for that. I created a life with my RMD. I didn't create a life just around it, just because of it. I did all of the things I wanted to do and what I thought after getting my first diagnosis I couldn't do. I went traveling, I lived abroad for a while, and all of the things I thought in the beginning would be impossible, I could do anyways. But I had to adjust them to my illness. Like I said, we are living with an RMD. That also means having a body that feels like it doesn't belong to you. I struggle a lot with the feeling that I'm losing control of my body, that I can't decide what's gonna happen next. Meaning I can't decide when my body is gonna go into a flare-up, but also I can't always decide if I'm gonna take medication or not, because it's just not an option, right? Feeling a loss of control when your joints just give out and you have to use a wheelchair or other things to just survive. And it comes with a lot of frustration. I can't tell you how many times I was just super, super frustrated because I knew what was happening. I knew what I was gonna do to make it better. I knew it would be better, but I was still pissed as hell. Because I didn't want to go through it again, but I didn't have a choice. Also, with not having this choice about your body and what is happening to it, makes you feel like makes you get a distorted self-perception. For me, it was like actually for a while a real feeling of depersonalization, like not recognizing my body when I was looking in the mirror as mine, because of, for example, the medication I was taking. I had side effects that made me gain a lot of weight, and I had the moon face and the water retention and all of that. And I looked in a mirror and I was like, that's not me. That's not how I look like. That's not how I feel like. And getting back to a place where I can say, yes, that is still me, but I didn't choose it, is quite hard. With that also comes a lot of time, a negative body image. Like I said, most of us have some kind of body deformities or side affections that make our invisible illness a little more visible and makes it hard to connect with our body, especially with the society we have telling us what is beautiful and what's not, right? And again, especially when you're a young person and you're just trying to fit in. With that feeling of trying to fit in, also comes the isolation, because you're not fitting in the end. You are not the same as your peers. You feel misunderstood. I told you before, I was told from my peers in school that I was just faking it and that I just didn't want to do something and then pretending I was in pain. And I really wasn't. And I just wanted to scream at them and be like, I would change everything if I would do everything that you don't want to do if I could just not have the pain. It made me feel really alone. And as we know, isolation is a really, really big symptom or risk factor for mental illnesses. Also, what I was struggling with was that running out of time all the time. Because like I said, everything feels harder. For me, taking out the trash is not just taking out the trash. It's bending down to get the trash out of the trash can. It's getting on my shoes. It's going out of the door. Maybe there's stairs involved. And then doing all of that again when you're going back up. And sometimes there's just not enough energy for that. So for people with RMD, the same things that for healthy people feel like nothing, like just something you would do, feel a lot harder and take way more energy. And that when you're already starting your day with having less energy because your body is fighting yourself, right? I mentioned the spoon theory here. I will not explain it, but if you're interested in the concept of how to explain to healthy people what it feels like to not have the energy or to do more, that it takes more energy to do the same things, you're welcome to look it up. Also, a lot of times, the lack of accessibility makes it worse, and the fatigue, right? I know that for most patients, the fatigue is, next to the pain, is the #1 symptom that we have to struggle with. When I did this presentation, I started to think, okay, how can I explain it in a way that people who do not struggle with an RMD can actually understand it? So I went to math, which doesn't sound natural to me, but I did. I looked up what is recommended. We use time, for what activity, how much time we should use per week, and statistics, how much we do use those activities per week. And then I went ahead and did some math, right? I said, okay, we sleep for 9 hours a day because we are patients, right? 9 hours is barely enough, which is 63 hours. Then we work 8 hours a week, like everyone else, 40 hours a week. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Sport is recommended with around 150 to 300 minutes per week. I went ahead and calculated with around 4 hours a week. Then, of course, we have housekeeping, family care, which comes down to around 19 hours, 50 minutes a week. Social life, meeting with friends, family, whatever, is around 12 hours, 50 a week. The use of media, social media, Netflix, whatever you prefer, is around 14 hours a week. Personal hygiene, 5 hours, 15. Travel times, to go to work, to go to school, to university, go back, go to the supermarket, all of that, around 7 hours a week. Of course, we have to survive, to eat, and we have to prepare food around 14 hours a week. And then if we are lucky, we have some hobbies that we can take part in, which comes to around 7 hours a week. And then I calculated how many hours are there actually in a week. It's 168 hours that we have. With all of the things I just said, we come down to minus 19 hours a week. So if we do everything like we should do and what the statistics say we do in a week, we are missing 1 day. And that feeling of missing a day has, like, everyone has it, like feeling like, oh, I'm running out of time again. Where did the week go? I wanted to do that, and I just couldn't do it. And this feeling, we have it a lot more because those hours, most of us take at least half the time on top of it. And I feel that really shows you in a way that that you can relate to how it feels like to be running out of time all of the time and just struggling to keep up. And with that comes the frustration when our physiotherapists, our doctors tell us it just takes 5 minutes a day, right? You can do those activities, it will make you feel better. It just takes 5 minutes a day. But for us, not just 5 minutes, is it? It's a lot more than just 5 minutes. And it can make you feel crazy. It can make you feel like, why can't you do it? I know it will help me. Why can't I do my exercises when I did it yesterday? Why can't I do it today? It can't be that hard. They can do it, why can't I? Like, all of those thoughts are happening. And that's exhausting when you're already exhausted because you are struggling with fatigue. So all of that, a lot of time, can lead you to a way to depression and anxiety, having those thoughts repeated in your head and just feeling alone with it. But I do not want to end this presentation with talking about how much it sucks to have an RMD, which it does, but with a message of hope. We can integrate our mental health in our treatment plan. Talk to your medical team about how you're struggling and why you're struggling, and make them see you, make them help you, because they can, and they can adjust your treatment plan so it actually works for you and does feel manageable. For me, one big thing was fighting that feeling of isolation or feeling alone and misunderstood. And I found that when I found my community in EULAR and in the German Rheumatology. So if you're a patient and you're struggling, look up what's happening around you. Are there other patients who can help you feel understood and get you all the tips and tricks that you may not know about when you're just starting out on your adventure. And to end with, I have the 3 A's to make it easy. It's awareness, adaptation, and assistance. Awareness, learn about your limitations and abilities. What can you do and what can't you do? How much time does it take me on a bad day? How much time does it take me on a good day and a normal day? What can I do and what can't I do? And reassess that all the time. And when you're learning about that and knowing about what your body can do, you can adjust your expectations and your time management. Like I said, we are all missing a day in a week, patients even more. But when we have the expectation of living a life the same way a healthy person does, we will not be able to achieve that. And if we manage this expectation and are like, okay, I cannot do the same things in the same time, but I will be able to do it. I just have to take my time. Then I'm feeling way less frustrated about something than when I would have the expectations for myself that I would do it in the same time or even a better time than other people around me. And then the last A, assistance, ask for help. On a bad day, on a good day, ask your support person around you for help, because no one can live this life alone. Not a healthy person, especially not a person with an RMD. And as someone who does struggle to ask for help, people are usually actually grateful when you do ask for it, because they do want to help you. Sometimes they just don't know how, or they don't want to be overbearing. And if they can't do it, they will tell you. And sometimes they might even surprise you. Thank you for your attention.
Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's heartbreaking to hear what you have been through. You've described feelings of uncertainty, grief, denial, acceptance. All of those are very hard feelings. But you do leave us with a message of hope. And I think for me as a rheumatologist, treating people like you, I think the biggest hope is to see people like you standing up here, sharing the story, representing the voice of so many people out there, and doing the work that you do. So really congratulations for all that and for your new role. Are there any questions for Caroline? There is one here. Yes.
Hello. Loved what you had to say. Also a patient, resonated with everything you said. I was curious, though. You said that you have family with a medical background?
Yes.
And you were obviously going through all of it very young. What areas did you find that your family, who are the medical professionals, didn't catch?
Oh, so my mom is a teacher for nurses. So she does have a medical background, but she's not a doctor, right? And there were issues when I was a child, like having back pain in elementary school, or having an inflammation in my knee when I was like 10, that no one knew where it came from and what to do with it. She did take me to a doctor and she did support me, but she maybe didn't push enough. I think it's also because now she's also a patient. She also has RMD, but she was diagnosed only 2 years ago or something. So I think a lot of times she was recognizing the symptoms I was having, but not recognizing symptoms because she was struggling with them herself and just thought it was normal because that's what she experienced her whole life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi,
Lucy.
from King's College London again. Thank you so much, Carolina, for sharing your story. I'm sure I speak for the entire room that we thank you for your courage on stepping on the stage and sharing your story with us. I had a question about a certain experience that you talked about, which was the depersonalization and you losing sort of trust in your body. And there's a lot of research ongoing, trying to understand interoception, trying to understand mindset and like the trust in body. And I was just wondering, for your own personal experience, what really helped you rebuild that trust in your own body?
That's a hard question because sometimes I don't have that trust yet because I live with the anxiety of what's gonna happen tomorrow, when is gonna be the next flare-up, and it's especially hard when I just experienced one.
Yeah.
But every time I have one and I keep fighting and I keep coming back to me and I keep coming back to the things I can do and relearning lifting weights and doing sports and just feeling how strong my body can be even when I'm not feeling strong. That really helped. So I really don't like to say it, but it was sports, I guess.
Sports. But I suppose a lot of that you had to carry yourself. Did you receive like additional support from like physiotherapists or from your clinical team to like help you reshape that body perception of yours?
Yes, I did go to therapy for a long time. I had physical therapy and rheumatological care, of course. But I have to say what I was lacking was that holistic or even interprofessional approach, because I was the one approaching those professions and saying like, I need that, I want that. And I was getting that, but I was getting it separately.
I see, yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been nicer for them to actively sort of approach you, because that's, you know, more spoons that you have to use to approach them and navigate the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, thank you.
Thank you both very much. Caroline, thank you.
It's Caroline, actually.
Is it Caroline?
Yeah, because in German it's Caroline, and the E is, you say it.
There
So
you
in English
go.
it's Caroline, but it's confusing.
This session has been a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. There's so many questions, I'm sure, but people and myself will come and find you at the booth.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
very welcome to find me at the Power booth. We also have a symptom lottery or bingo.
Yes,
That you
there's a
can
lot of exciting activity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, we are running a little bit behind schedule, but I can see there's a lot of enthusiasm in the room. I'd like to welcome up our next speaker, Professor Bente Appel Espensen, Professor of Rheumatology in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I know that Bente has a strong interest in self-management. We've worked together previously on the self-management recommendations, and you'll be telling us about screening, support, and integrated care models. Over to you, Bente.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. So also thank you, Caroline. It's not easy to take over from here, but thank you for sharing your story. First of all, I also want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me for this presentation today. I have no disclosures, and you are allowed to take pictures. The aim of this presentation is to provide some insight into how we can address mental health in rheumatology by focusing on screening possibilities, support for people with inflammatory arthritis, and also or people experience mental health challenges. And also I will present a stepped care model approach in rheumatology practice. I have had some troubles in preparing this presentation because I'm fully aware that the variability in rheumatology practice is different across Europe. Some countries that patients they will see only the rheumatologist. Other countries they will see also a nurse, and other countries will see an interdisciplinary team. But I hope that what I will talk about now, that you can sort of take some messages from that. Also, that there are really limited research on mental health in inflammatory arthritis. And special intervention studies are scarce. Well, I want to start that we do well on inflammation. So back this last 15, 20 years, we have improved in treat-to-target strategies and biologics. And a lot of patients, they have low disease activity. Many patients are in what we call remission. But still, many patients still struggle. They struggle with higher symptom burden, fatigue, pain, sleep disturbances. They're also socially challenged, and they have frequent healthcare use compared to others, and also mental health problems. So this topic is really relevant, and I want to pay attention to a national cross-sectional study we did in Denmark a couple of years ago, including more than 12,000 patients with inflammatory arthritis. And we found that anxiety and depression is very common across all three diagnoses. Highest prevalence among people with SPA and psoriasis arthritis, more than 30%. And lower, but still substantial in people with RA, about 22%. More than 1/3 of the people reported loneliness, a feeling of loneliness. So this topic is really relevant. So the key question is, if we agree that people with inflammatory arthritis are suffering from mental health challenges, then the key question is, of course, how can we identify them? And the first thing I want to address here is screening. And I want to emphasize that screening is not the same as diagnosis. And we are not talking about rheumatologists to become psychiatrists. But screening has to do about identify possible concerns, broad and brief assessments, guides to a next step, and it's not a diagnosis. Whereas the diagnostic in psychiatry has more to do about investigating and the patient's story, which will result in a possible clinical diagnosis. So in screening, the purpose is to identify and prioritize who may need some sort of support. And in diagnostic process, the purpose is to understand and treat mental disorders. So screening helps us to ask the right question, and the diagnostic process helps us to answer it. But what should screening look like? First of all, I think it should be short, 1 to 2 to 3 minutes. It should be based on patient-reported outcomes, or what we call PROs. It should be simple, and it's really important that the patients are familiar to the questions or the tool. It should be integrated in routine care that could be digital, paper, face-to-face. And it's really important that we don't choose to screen those we think are high-risk patients, but that we screen all patients that will give the best result. And it needs to be repeated over time, because as disease activity can fluctuate, mental health challenges can also. Sometimes when I have been discussing with colleagues in the clinic about screening patients for mental health issues, there are some concerns. One concern is we don't have time. But I want to say that screening is faster than managing all the consequences if we don't do that. Another concern, we do not know what to do with the results. My answer would be then build a pathway. And the third concern could be patients don't want to talk about mental health, and that is not true. Patients expect holistic care, and that's also what you addressed, Caroline. But I have to say, in rheumatology, we don't have a single perfect screening tool. There are different tools out there for different purposes, developed in different settings. But here I want to present 3 different tools. The first one is the MD-HAQ, Multidimensional Health Assessment Questionnaire. I think that most clinicians and patients are familiar with this questionnaire, and it's also frequently used in research. But it's a patient-centered report tool used to access physical function and activities in daily living, pain, fatigue, and overall status. But behind the HAQ score, there are various questions, and there are 2 questions that are addressing mental health. These are, over the last week, were you able to deal with fatigue, feeling with anxiety and being nervous, or were you able to deal with feelings of depression or feeling blue? And there are 4 different answer possibilities. In 2023, this article was published, Screening for Anxiety in Patients with Inflammatory Arthritis using the MD-HAQ. And the aim was to analyze if the MD-HAQ in screening for anxiety in patients with rheumatoid arthritis and PSA compared with the hospital anxiety depression scale, and I will mention that later. But they concluded that HAQ provides information like HATS in screening for anxiety in patients with RA and PSA. They also conclude that the use of the 2 single questions, the mental health questions, may prove a valuable tool in routine care in rheumatology. But they also conclude that to screen for depression, the HATS may be used as single questions instead of requiring multiple questionnaires. But we have to be aware that MD-HAQ may provide useful signals of distress or mental health issues, but it's not developed as a mental health screening tool like HATS is. The second one I want to mention is 3 different instruments that are developed for the 3 diagnoses, RA, PSA, and SPA, measuring the impact of the disease. The strength is here also that the patients, they are familiar, and also clinicians with these instruments, and they also capture emotional impact, and it's integrated in disease assessment. And just an example for the rate, the impact of disease for people with RA, the question 6 is emotional well-being. Considering your arthritis overall, how would you rate your level of emotional well-being during the past week? Circle the number that best describes your level of emotional well-being. And when patients, they answer this question, it will give me as a nurse an indicator or a sense what is going on here, how well will the patient cope with emotional issues. The third one and the last one I want to mention is the Hospital Anxiety Depression Scale, what we call HATS. It's longer, it consists of 14 items, and it's designed for somatic illness, but it excludes somatic symptoms. It is divided into 2 subscales, anxiety and depression. It's less sensitive to small change, and we need to be aware that it can be quite costful because depending on what you will use it for. So there's no perfect screening instrument in AI, and the choice really depends on purpose and context. But if we have identified a patient that has some mental health challenges, what should we do next? And the rest of my presentation now, I will pay attention to this stepped care model approach. And I will go through all 3 levels and try to apply it into rheumatology. But what is this stepped care model approach? It's a systematic approach that tailors intervention to patients' needs, and it provides different levels of intensity. It consists of 3 levels: low intensity support, targeted interventions, and then specialist care. But how does it support mental health, this model? Well, it matches the care that the individual patient needs. So it avoids under and over treatment. So we're not offering the same treatment to all patients. And therefore it's also efficient use of resources. It's flexible. And I know that a lot of interventions tested also into rheumatology have been based on CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and this is also one of the most studied and adaptable approaches in this stepped care approach. What about in rheumatology? Well, I haven't seen any models describing the stepped care approach in rheumatology, but it's really well established in mental health care. In rheumatology, I haven't seen that, as I said, but it's often implemented as components rather than the full pathway, level 1, 2, and 3. But what about the evidence about this model? In 2024, this publication came out, and it's an umbrella review of meta-analysis. It consists of 10 systematic reviews based on 38 primary studies on depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and they have included different models of stepped care. And what is important, I think, that the overall effectiveness in improving depression and anxiety outcomes was one of the conclusions. So in other settings, this model has been both used and also efficient. So, but how can we support? And now I will present the different levels to you. The first level is low intensity support. It addresses universal support and self-help resources to promote well-being and prevent problems in patients. And in the model, it consists of these 5 components. The first one is screening and brief assessment. And that is what we have been talking about now, also about screening. That is what I will encourage the clinics actually to do. The second one is psychoeducation, and applying that into rheumatology. That is to understand the disease and also the mental health links, symptom education, and as Caroline talked about, all the uncertainty having been given a diagnosis. So the psychoeducation is something that could be integrated in our clinic to prevent mental health challenges. The third one is self-management support. And in rheumatology, we have been working a lot with self-management, and there are a lot of intervention studies that have been proved that it is efficient to provide self-management in people with IE. It's about goal setting, coping strategies, problem solving, and also strengthen self-efficacy. The fourth component in this level is lifestyle intervention. That is really always relevant for our patients. Physical activity, sleep support, fatigue management, quit smoking. We have a lot of research about that also. And maybe mental health has not been the primary outcome in these studies, but we have results measuring as a secondary outcome, that it helps also to offer people lifestyle intervention and will strengthen their mental health. And finally, in this step is peer and digital support, which we also have tested in rheumatology. Group education, online resources, and patient communication, communities or organizations that really can support people in their mental health. This step, or this level, has the strongest rheumatology evidence. The second one is a target intervention, and it's focused, time-limited support for individuals at increased risk or with emergent difficulties in mental health issues. This step covers 4 different issues. So, and I have mentioned before, one of them is the cognitive behavior approach. That is, as I mentioned before, something we have tested also in rheumatology practice. But also symptom-focused interventions is part of this step. So it might be that a patient is suffering from fatigue or sleep or stress, pain, and related to the first presenter, I mean, it's really important that when we meet patients with these symptom burdens, we will think about also the mental health. And in rheumatology, we have been testing also intervention targeted these symptoms. The third component is mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy approach. And also, Caroline, you addressed that about acceptance. That can be a really important thing and also a really important thing to address to prevent mental health problems, emotions regulation and resilience building. And the fourth component here is digital guided intervention, which also we are familiar with in rheumatology, has been efficient in not only disease-related issues, but also mental health issues. So at this level or this step, we have moderate evidence within rheumatology. So the first and the last step is specialist care. It's high intensity, individualized support for complex and persistent needs. And it covers 5 different components. Mental health specialist involvement. That is in the case where a patient need a clinical psychologist, psychiatrist, and psychotherapist. That is something which is not really much tested or addressed in rheumatology. We need some more research on that. Psychiatry treatment, when indicated, is the second component, and that is if a patient has a psychiatric diagnosis and need medication, or for example, treatment for depression and anxiety disorders. The third component is the multidisciplinary care. And you also mentioned that, Caroline, as an important part of your disease trajectory. But it's important at this step that we not only refer a patient to a rheumatologist or to a nurse, but that is really a team that are working together. That is also the reason why I have put in plus and not or. The fourth component in this step 3 is individualized interventions. And that is something that we are missing in rheumatology testing, but it's about addressing intervention to people with severe depression, anxiety, trauma-related symptoms, persistent distress, and complex pain. And that could also be, as you, Caroline, you have a long history before you actually got your diagnosis, and that is really related to trauma in a lot of patients. But we need more evidence how we can integrate that into rheumatology. And the fifth component here is a coordinated follow-up. Also because mental health issues will fluctuate, so it's really important to follow up with monitoring symptoms, and also adjustment of treatment intensity. Here, as I said, it's an important step, but less studied in rheumatology. And I can really just encourage researchers to take over here and focus on step 3 in the coming research. Can we do screening, support, and integrated care models? Yes, but not perfectly and not all at once. So start small, build pathways, and scale gradually. So what about screening? Well, it is possible to screen, and it's important that we do it early. But if we identify a person that has a need for some kind of mental health support, it might not be that all patients need level 3 or step 3 in a specialist care. And it's really important that screening is linked to action. So what about support? Well, we know that mental health strongly impacts outcomes in people living with AI. And it's really important that I, as a clinician, recognize and validate, together with the patient, that this is common the way you're feeling right now. And it's important that we focus on support that strengthens patients' resources and not only focus on what is the problem in the patient's life. Talking about the integrated model, well, I think that the step care model is promising. That is something I would like to work more with in rheumatology. And it's also important that to emphasize that this do not require a full system redesign. You could really start in the small at level 1 and 2 and be aware in the clinic, where are we here, what offer do we have. The evidence is growing and is also an important area for future research, as I just mentioned. So the take-home messages, mental health is not a new thing in rheumatology. It is a part of rheumatology, and it has been for ages, but it's a new thing that we are addressing it like we do in this session. Routine screening is feasible, and it really should also be a part of all 3 steps in this step care model approach. It's important that the support match patients' needs, that we're not offering the same thing to all patients. And I also believe that the step care offers a practical framework to work on. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bente, for your very interesting talk. We are running out of time, but we have time for a short question, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Bente, for your talk. This has been such a fantastic session, so interesting and so important, and it was great to hear Caroline's story. I just wonder why, and you've touched on it in your presentation, we don't have a very full room. Is it because health professionals feel that they can't do anything primarily, that we don't have more people listening to this fantastic presentation? And we don't have psychology in rheumatology. It's a big missing piece. We shout about it as patient organizations all the time, but it seems to be that the health professionals are very slow in wanting to pick it up and do what you're doing, and even if it's not perfect, try and do something.
Before you answer your question, could you put my presentation all again, because there is a QR code. I promise that you could vote or something like that. Yeah. I don't know why we are so few here, but I think that maybe rheumatologists, but also rheumatology nurses, really don't know really to handle the mental health challenges. But I don't think we should be that afraid, really. It's not dangerous if a patient is sad or is crying. It's quite normal. So I think it's it's important that we share with one another, that we want to validate together with the patients that it's common to be sad, and also because the disease, they're fluctuating, so that, I mean, time is changing for the patient. But I think also it's time now to focus much more on mental health, and it's not only in rheumatology, it's in the total society, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, one last question, please.
It's not so much a question, it's more some sort of an answer to your question or comment, some sort of a comment. I think coming from the industry, I can say that sometimes when we go to the regulators and propose quality of life outcome, you know, I think most of the time it's very, very difficult to get that accepted. They are much more into how many flares per year, I mean, very quantitative measures. So as industry, I mean, I don't want to represent the whole industry, but I think the quality of life measurements are very seldom taken seriously by the health authority as a primary endpoint, you know, for drug testing. So that makes also our industry difficult to address those, because we know there's not a very easy path forward. I mean, I'm not saying there's not, but it's a very challenging and difficult path forward.
And anxiety and depression could be even more dangerous than quality of life to measure in that setting. Yeah, I think it's important that we measure it and that we follow people how they're doing mentally.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting talk and for this very interesting session. On the part of Elena and me, I would like to thank you nonetheless for attending this session. There are lots of other clashing sessions with very interesting topics. However, I will recommend when I'm coming home to watch this session on demand on the EULAR TV and to submit the message to more of our colleagues, because I think it's so important. We have seen very interesting talk from the science, laying the basis for this topic and the patient perspective, and some example how to deal with it in the practice. So a lot of things we could improve, and I hope we will go on and have a very nice and good congress to all of you. Thank you very much.